G'day folks, ZigD here. Trial of the Ancestors is quite complicated and kind of poorly explained. My favorite combination. That means I get to figure it out and then figure out a good way to explain it to people. I just spent way too long playing this yesterday when I should have been leveling. I'm not even at endgame yet. And once I started to understand what was going on with the League mechanic, I really started liking it as well, though I will admit that it was initially quite frustrating. Now though, I do feel like I might just do it exclusively and skip the regular endgame for a while, as this is a really fun and nuanced League mechanic. As such, this won't be a comprehensive guide, but rather a beginner's guide to the basics, giving you an idea of how it plays and how to start winning tournaments. Trial of the Ancestors is an arena battler, inspired by games like Teamfight Tactics. It almost feels like a sports strategy game in a way, only you get to jump in and help execute the plays yourself. Each side has a captain, you on your side, and one of the crewy ancestors on the opposing side. An interesting note, as you play the campaign, more and more crewy ancestors kind of join the mechanic as well, so the roster expands. There's a lot of them too, and they all have lore. It's crazy how much character voice acting and stuff is in this league. Each side deploys the rest of their warriors in different positions on the field: attack, flanking, escort, and defense. Each warrior and each captain has a totem located where they were placed on the field, and that totem respawns the captain or warrior if they die. Your objective is to destroy the enemy's totems while preventing them from doing the same to yours. That's the first and most important thing to really wrap your head around to drive home. Everything you do needs to be in the service of destroying the enemy's totems and protecting yours. What you do in combat, how you place your warriors, what warriors you add to your team, and what other supporting items you take all work towards your strategies of kill enemy totems and protect friendly totems. So with that said, let's jump into a fresh round and I'll talk about the positions and what they mean. Okay, so first up we have the attacker slots, these crossed swords here along the front lines. Units placed in these slots will seek out enemies that they can see and fight them first as their priority, and then once all the enemies in their kind of range, I guess, are killed, they will focus on destroying enemy totems, channeling them and bringing them down. The attacker's slot, interestingly, actually makes a very important defensive slot at times. Like for example, if the enemy has a flanker in the flanker position that's trying to sneak around the side, having an attacker there, up here, to counteract them, they will engage the flanker and kill them if they see them, if they aren't first drawn away by something else. So sometimes having an attacker might be better than having a defender to stop a flanker from even getting to your totems potentially. Of course, there's a lot of nuance to this game, as I mentioned, because if this attacker is drawn away, then that flanker might very well have an opening to kill their totem while they're distracted. Attackers make you a good all-rounder grunt, and it's never really a wrong idea to put units in attackers if you're not sure where to put them. Next up we have flankers, possibly one of the most important role, as their primary role is killing enemy totems. They will prioritize that and try and sneak around or avoid enemy units and focus on dealing with enemy totems. Well-placed flankers can make a big difference because while you're distracting the enemy, they'll be the ones that are in the enemy's backlines taking them out. What will often happen, for example, is that you and your units, your attackers and your escorts and the enemy's attackers and escorts will kind of engage in the midfield perhaps and get distracted with just killing each other. What will happen then is one of your flankers or an enemy flanker might come around and start dealing with totems while that is happening in the midfield. So the flankers play a very important role there. They are somewhat hard countered, however, by the defenders. The defenders don't push over to the enemy's side of the fields, at least not usually. I think sometimes they might end up being drawn across the field a little bit. But for the most part, their role is to stay on your side of the field and defend your totems. There is some nuance to how they play that I'm still trying to figure out, like how far they push forwards and how different units act in this role that I'm exploring it. But generally speaking, defenders are your last line of defense, especially against flanking units, as you know that they're going to stay there most of the time and deal with the flankers if they do slip through. I mentioned the idea of having an attacker here to try and snipe a flanker before they get into a flanking position. Well, having a defender there, they're not going to get drawn away in the main skirmish in the middle of the field. So they're going to stay here, and then when the flanker comes around, they'll be there ready to intercept them and distract them and stun them when they try to start channeling totems. Flankers might still get chip damage even if you have a good defensive line, so it's better for you personally to deal with flankers, I find, or to have a nice attacker counter them. Either way, if there's a strong enemy flanking presence, it's a very good idea to keep a close eye on it yourself as the player, and just make sure that none of them have kind of snuck through. Do remember that you can use the minimap or your overlay map to see if one of your totems is currently being channeled, and get back there and stun them and take them out, because it's often a flanker that's snuck through. The final role is the escort role, and these units will stay with you, so whatever you happen to be doing is kind of what they'll be doing. So the role is quite good for anything that gives you buffs, or just general good fighters if you're going to be focusing on dealing with the enemy bulk of fighters. So if they've, for example, this particular strategy here with Martyr is a very defensive strategy with a lot of supports, a lot of escorts on their leader. So you might potentially want to focus on dealing with them and having a strong party yourself to deal with that. Or you might just ignore that and focus on a flanker strategy to get around them. Of course, the way the enemy positioned is here, and this is just an idea of how you might start looking at these things, is we know the enemy has a very dedicated defensive line. Although it's an unusual defensive line because the Thunderbirds and these piggies here, they tend to charge forwards or teleport forwards. So it's a very... although it's a defensive line, the actual unit type kind of changes the way they'll function, because these pigs will often charge deep into the battlefield, and so they might end up fighting in the middle anyway. So worth considering, but it also means that these could be drawn out of line, and flankers on this side could do pretty well, whereas flankers on this side probably aren't going to do so well. The other thing to consider is that, like, the Thunderbird can jump on a sneaky quick flanker because it's got a teleporting skill, so lots of things to consider with the units and the positions. The other thing to consider, of course, is your unit distribution and the sorts of units you have and what they're going to be particularly good at. I have a Spear Dancer here with fast movement speed and reduced time to revive. Pretty good, well suited to a flanking role, and I'm going to try and put them in this flanking role there to try and get around behind enemy units. It's always good to have at least some flankers, even if your opponent is pretty defensively positioned, especially if you have enough units to field. I am a little bit worried about this stealth guy kind of sneaking in stealth, and then sniping some of my totems while we're distracted. So I'm probably likely to put like an Honored Sage here, which has a ranged spell attacker. So when this thing starts channeling, they can go, oh crap, and then fire a projectile at them, stunning them, and giving me time to go back and kill them, or killing them themselves. The Hinakora's Horn prevent respawning on enemy totems, or they can bolster your own team's respawns, so I like to have them on defense. The Goliath is a strong midfielder with a stunning slam, and I have an item on them that stuns them when they revive, so they're well placed here in the middle, because if they get killed pretty early, which they probably will, when they revive here, there'll be like a stun on any enemies that are nearby to those totems, which is pretty often going to happen. So I'm going to put those in the midfield there. The Warcaller has like an onslaught horn effect that it can do, so it's a good positioned in escort here, so it can blow its horn and give onslaught to our troops here and us potentially. After that, I'm just going to fill out my attacker slots, get those all full. Like I said, if you're not sure where to put someone, putting them in the attacker slot is never a bad idea. And then I might also add some people to flanking. Okay, now while that match plays out, let's talk about destroying and protecting those totems. Totems are not destroyed by regular damage. You don't attack them, but rather they're damaged by a captain or a warrior walking up to one of them and then channeling it. Left click and hold on an enemy totem to begin channeling, and the health will begin to lower until it explodes, perma-killing the warrior or captain associated with it. For most warriors, a totem being channeled delays respawn if the associated warrior is currently dead. This can lead to timing attacks where you kill a warrior or a leader and then quickly channel their totem to lock them down and try and finish them off. You can channel a totem a little bit to do some chip damage and then move to another one and do the same, wearing them down opportunistically over time. This is important because of the stun mechanic. When a warrior or a player is channeling a totem and they get hit by a damage dealing skill, they are stunned, sometimes for a very long time. This stun is a unique mechanic and cannot be resisted by stun immune characters. It also seems that pure damage over time non-hitting skills might not hit the enemy and then trigger the stun, but hits actually do seem to do so consistently. So this means two things. You can and do want to interrupt enemies that begin channeling your side's totems, protecting your totem and giving yourself a good opportunity to kill that stunned warrior. It also means that you have to be very careful about when you try and channel enemy totems. You can hit and run when you're not being attacked, or you can try for timing pushes where you wipe the enemy team out and try to snipe a totem while they're respawning. Just be careful you don't start a totem channel while your projectiles are flying towards you or something like that, as that stun is quite brutal. You as the player can and should channel enemy totems sometimes to pull off an opportunistic totem kill or tip a tough match in your favor, but I will say that you're much more powerful fighting in most cases. Unless you're a summoner or a similar something like that passive damage build, your strategy is mostly to manage the enemy's team's warriors and buy the opportunity for your warriors to take down totems. That's because the opportunity cost of them getting stunned is not as bad as the opportunity cost of you getting stunned. So flankers play a huge role here. If you can distract and kill off the enemy team, that leaves your flankers to sneak in and take down totems. Of course, defenders must be considered, but you can also help manage them. Start channeling a totem deep in enemy territory and you'll pull the defenders away, and then you can engage them in combat while your flankers get in and do what they need to do. This is really where the nuance of the game starts to show. Your build, your warriors, the enemy warriors and their positions, and even the different playstyles of each PoE ancestor all factor into the strategy of each match. The best approach is going to vary from match to match and player to player. Seeing how this plays out is why I'm initially really liking this league mechanic. It's a lot of fun to play and it seems to have a lot of strategic depth to it. But now let's get out and talk about between match progression stuff. So first, when you go to pick a match, you'll notice a few different things on the screen here. There's obviously the big obvious reward, and you might be likely to be like, I'm going to pick these based on this. But if you're focusing on winning the tournament, then you may want to look at the other sides. So each hero has a different strategy and play style that you'll have to consider. And that's just sort of going to have to be the thing you'll have to learn over time, potentially. This symbol here means that they'll be eliminated next time they're defeated in combat. Now you can also have that symbol and everyone effectively gets one free loss and then they will be eliminated on the next loss. So these two have lost once so far against probably others because I don't think I faced them. But if I can basically choose who I want to wipe out here. Sometimes it can be a good idea to wipe out someone who's potentially getting a bit dangerous early on so that you'll have an easier time deeper in the tournament and they don't have a chance to snowball out of control, because effectively the better people do, the better warriors they're going to be fielding further down the line. Exactly the nuances of how that works out, I haven't figured it out yet, but I've definitely seen significant differences in power level. And I suspect it might be somewhat indicated here by how much sponsor is being offered to take them down, because that's what this next part is here. So we know that Tofoa is offering 750 karma or reward or whatever it is for taking down Kilowava, and then Namahu and Valako are offering 750 and 250, so 1,000 total to take down Akoya. So we can probably assume that Akoya is probably a little tougher because more people are effectively setting a bounty to sponsor you to take them down. The main thing to consider here as well, of course, is that you want to be getting these so that you can spend them, and that is how you progress match to match. That is how you get more powerful. You always get some favor with Navali, but Navali sells you garbage rubbish units. They are your backup units. They're enough to keep you kind of going and to keep you growing, and they can also be traded around, but for the most part, that's not what you're focusing on. You're focusing on building up favor with other specific factions so that you can buy their powerful units. As such, early on, if you're feeling pretty confident, it's nice to take sponsors that are going to give you a lot of points. Especially, I like to favor ones that are going to give you more points rather than, let's say you've got an offer for 250, but they're for 5 different people, versus an offer that has like 750, 750. In that case, you're going to be able to buy more with the 750s than you can with the 250s. And that's because if we go and actually look at one of these, you'll notice that units tend to cost at least 500 points, if not a bit more. So the Spear Dancers are 650, and then a Sunset Sage with an item already equipped that gives you and nearby allies Tailwind, excellent purchase, is 975. You can actually get some elite units with, like, you can kind of see different borders here that kind of denote a rarity. So like this is a normal one, this is a bit more rare with the purple, and this has got a fancier purple border. So this is like kind of, you potentially your best option here, although each unit is different. There's a lot of nuance here again, but they can cost, I've seen ones cost like 1500 plus. As such, 750 is a nice one to go for because you can often get a unit for 750, or you'll be close to getting a unit if you sell something else. And that is indeed, if you missed it, something that you can do. So once your primary goal here, I'll just say this, is to get as many units as possible as early as possible. Filling your field is much more important most of the time than getting items, or especially getting those idle totem things. Those are like kind of like if you, maybe the last match you have some points to burn, you can spend it on that. They're generally not a big deal. Some items can be pretty big, like Birthing Spoon's pretty good on a flanker, for example. And there are some very powerful items, so those can be worth considering when placed on a powerful unit to like make them do a lot more. But for the most part, your main thing is fielding as many units as possible. Now keep in mind that there are 4 different types of slots that you can put units in. So you potentially, if you're picking up a lot of flanking style units, just remember there's only 4 flanking slots you can actually put them into. And then in total, that means there's 16 units that you can have. So if you get more than 16, that's when you want to start trading them up potentially. But getting to 16 or close to 16 is your main priority. Navali is something that helps you get there because she nearly always gives you a troop for 250 and she gives you 250 favor even if you lose. As such, you can spend, I could buy 2 Tuataras here and focus on selling them. There's like a cold resistance item stacked Tuatara here, so alternatively that's a good idea, but I actually probably will just go for like the 2. We can only get 1 per, but I could get the item anyway, so it doesn't matter. We can spend the other 250 on reduced time to revive here. Honestly, not even a bad item, so we can put that over there. And then we want to take a look at the points we've got. Another thing to consider is whenever you're picking your next match, keep in mind who you already have points with. If you already have 500 points with Velarco, for example, doing another match that's going to give you another 500 or 750 points for Velarco could well get you one of those rarer, more valuable units. So worth considering. Also worth considering what can you kind of potentially work towards if you do trade some stuff. Now, if we have a look at our unit roster currently, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6... Pass the wall call, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, I believe. So we're not quite full, but we're pretty full. And it's at this point that I would certainly consider trading up to more powerful units if they do seem to be available. Tidecallers, for example, I really like. I'd be quite happy to trade something up for the Tidecaller. Even something like an Honored Sage and a Tuatara up for a Tidecaller, or 2 Tuataras is not really a bad trade in my mind. I could even trade an item if I wanted to, like a cheaper item like the Emerging Bellow, and get the Tidecaller that way to field more units total. So there we go, we got ourselves a nice unit. I could have alternatively traded more for a Lunar Turtle, but then I would start maybe selling a lot of units, and maybe I don't want to do that. We also have access to a Thunderbird. I'm quite happy to trade it to a Tuatara up for a Thunderbird here, or I could sell this Battle Call and field another unit since we're not kind of capped out yet. Now, another thing to consider is that you might not win your first tournament, and it's pretty hard with the starting units, as they are just the Honored Sage, the Warrior, and a Tuatara. You know, these units are rubbish, right? Like, they are your starting units, they're pretty bad. These ones with their abilities listed, those are much better. And then, obviously, there's different tiers below that get even better as well. As such, your goal in your first tournament is more actually just to get a couple of wins than to try and, I mean, if you can win the whole tournament, go for it, sure. But if you get a couple of wins, what will happen is you'll impress some of the various Kirui ancestors, and then they will offer you some warriors for free at the start of your next tournament. If you win a tournament, you often get 3, for example. So this tournament I started with Honored Sage, Honored Warrior, Tuatara, and like 3 other units. I think like a Spear Dancer, a Piggy, and a Warcaller. So that is obviously a huge advantage to your future tournaments. So you can keep snowballing that forwards. That's the pseudo meta progression that exists. Of course, the other meta progression is your character and how they keep getting better. Now, I think I'll just play out this next match, just free form here, so that you guys can get a little bit of an unscripted idea of how it all plays out. I have some points with Velarco, so probably better to go to Akoya, but we're in the final rounds here. It doesn't really matter too much. So I'll take Akoya. There's a chance I might be able to get a better unit with that. All right, so my opponent has 2 kind of slower but tankier units on flanking here. Otherwise, they've got some thick units on attack, and then some speedier things. Well, they got a speedier thing on escort here and 1 on defense. They got a little bit of a defensive side on here. As such, I'm probably best off positioning my better flankers, which are my upgraded Spear Dancers that I've got here. So I've got 2 Spear Dancers with spoons that make them faster. On this side here, where it's a little bit less defender, there's 1 less defender there. We can probably try and fight on this bottom half of the field and draw most of them down. Otherwise, we're just going to focus on filling out our slots here. Now, the Tidecaller has a wave that knocks enemies back. Pretty good defender, actually. What I could do is trade out 1 of those, put the Hinokora's Horn up here, and put a Tidecaller here on defense. She can cast her wave down this flank and just push these slower defenders back, which is going to take them a really long time to come back from. So that could work quite well here for us. Otherwise, we have mostly probably just going to fill out these escort slots just for the battle in the midfield, I think. I do have a Thunderbird that I'm not really super keen on. I'll put him up on the escort anyway. Yeah, we'll just fill out the escort slots here. I don't think it's going to matter too much. I have 1 spare unit, so we'll just put them on flank. If they end up sniping some totems or doing a little bit of chip damage, that's all fine by me. It looks like strategy-wise, the main thing for this fight is going to be pretty straightforward. Try and fight on this side of the field a little bit. So I might just scoop up a little bit and then draw them down this way and try and fight most of the attackers and the escorts and their leader on this side. And if I can kill off the flankers, then that's even better. And if I'm just fighting down here, probably what's going to win this match is just my flankers, really, honestly. And that is often the case. Flankers play a big role here. All right, let's move in. I'm going to move out pretty aggressively and try and grab these ones. And we're just keeping one eye up on the mini-map, or your overlay map if you prefer, just to see if any of our totems are being channeled. And, you know, sometimes you'll miss it, but mini-map, if you ever played a strategy game, keeping an eye on the mini-maps, always really good. Alright, so we're mostly just kind of, since I'm playing like a cold dot build here, which is working pretty well for this league, I'm just focused on spreading those cold dots around, chilling the enemies, and wearing them down a little bit while my team engages. We're doing our role pretty well here, which was just to keep their team down the bottom, and that does seem to be working out quite nicely, and I already see a flanker on the bottom there, and on the top taking out their totems. But you can see on the mini-map that our flankers are doing their job. I'm taking quite a lot of damage here, I might have to back off a little bit. Ooh, yeah, there we go. Alright, looks like one of our totems is being attacked here, but we've got 3 flankers in their backline right now, taking out their totems. There goes one. Our totems are getting damaged here. We're going to get respawned pretty soon, hopefully. We do take a totem loss there, and there's our respawn. Okay, thankfully. Alright, let's clear up any of the enemies that have snuck through into our side. Focus on hitting them first, just to get those stuns out. Oh my god, the damage. It's a pretty nasty fight, actually. It's going to be hard fought, but I think we're going to win it. Obviously getting killed is something to avoid, but, you know, if your team is doing its job correctly, you can respawn and get back into it. It's certainly not the end of the match. If you're playing hardcore, you don't die as well, which is nice. There we go. So you'd be like, hey, wait, we just won? Oh yeah, the flankers, right? They were doing their job. While we were dealing with a lot of their attackers, since they had a pretty aggressive strategy, you know, our flankers were just over there, just destroying totems non-stop, end to end. So a fantastic win there. A little bit hard fought for a moment there. All right, we'll close this tournament out for you as a little final part of this video. As such, we have only like one clear spot left. I'll buy a Tuatara here from Navali, and then we have 850 at Velarco and 250 at Namahu. So let's just check. Where's Namahu again? I kind of wish it was easier to find and access all of these. Namahu is up here, right? Yeah, it's Calm, yeah. I wish it was a little bit easier to find them. So I could trade something up to an item here, but it's probably not a big deal. The Volcanic Emblem is actually quite nice. I could trade a Tuatara for it, if I can get a unit from the other one without trading anything. Let's see. So I can just get a Thunderbird. I'm not going to be able to afford the Storm Conduit, as good as they are. I think I will trade the Tuatara for the item, and then get a Thunderbird. So we can get that Tuatara and sell it at Calm. And I think I counted that right. I'm pretty sure that gives us 16 units. So we'll take the Volcanic Emblem, and then we'll put the Volcanic Emblem on something that we want to revive immediately, potentially. That can honestly just be almost anyone, a good fighter, something that charges in and does a lot of damage, or just something powerful. We'll just go for the Goliath of Night, maybe. It's a frontliner. It's right up there in the middle for me. All right, let's close this tournament out, see if we can get ourselves a win. Not many sponsors offered, but it really doesn't matter because it's the last round. It's like we might get ourselves a Summon a Spirit of Kilowava skill when you block damage from a unique enemy. Cute. All right, I have no idea what that does. Yeah, we had one last slot, and it was a flanker slot, which we can put our bird in, so that's perfect. All right, and because we did our job earlier in the tournament of taking out the ones that were really snowballing, they actually aren't fielding a full team, so that makes things a lot easier for us. So this is probably going to be a pretty easy match in the end. We killed off the stronger ones early, and that is, again, as I mentioned before, a really good strategy to do. The other thing I want to talk about while I'm doing this is just build consideration. Something I've noticed is that there are basically kind of counters to almost any playstyle. Like here's Proximity Shield. My build ignores Proximity Shields. I'm pretty happy with like this as a dot build because it ignores things like Block and Proximity Shield that come up pretty often. But there are advantages to basically any playstyle, so I think some builds are certainly going to work better, but I don't think it's going to be like Sanctum where it's just like, well, you picked the wrong build, you can't play this league. Oh my god, I got zapped by the Stormcaller. That lightning blast does so much damage. How's my lightning res? Oh, it's a little low. That's why. I'm still leveling, I'm not even endgame yet. But so like projectile build, right? Like, yeah, it's going to get countered by proximity shields, but spamming projectiles is an excellent way to defend and stun enemies that are trying to channel totems, right? So minion builds are probably going to be able to do pretty good at sniping totems while their minions deal with enemies, like that passive damage dealing. The only thing, like pure dot builds that don't have a hitting skill might have trouble like stunning, but you could probably just use like Orb of Storms or something like that. There's also room for utility skills. I'm using Summon Stone Golem, which does distract enemies. And man, the respawn timer here. Oh, I'm getting channeled. That's why. Oh no. If you get channeled, it interrupts your respawn. Some of my defenders do some work for me. I can see my totem health going down. I think we're going to win anyway, which is kind of hilarious. There we go. Yeah, woo. Thank you, defenders. They just had to interrupt the people that were channeling our totem. They almost got the totem though. It was Kilowava himself. It was like working on our totem there. But yeah, there's room for utility skills like Void Sphere, Ice, Frost Wall, Taunt, Totems, Decoy Totems, things like that. I think all of those are going to actually play a role in this, which is super cool. I'm very happy that GGG kind of like allowed these things to work seemingly. Like the Taunt Slam on the Stone Golem works. So try and experiment with different utility skills. I've not tried very many myself yet, but it looks like, and I've been hearing like a lot of them will work. So we won ourselves a tournament, and because we did so, next tournament's going to be easier because we will start with these units. These warriors are proved of the honor and want to join us now. We also got rank, which seems to determine monster level, but I'm not quite sure how that works yet, so I need to see about that more. When you win a tournament, you get the reward for the match from the chest, which was our loyalty tattoo, but then you also get to pick something from here. So there's generally an omen, and then one of these. The omens are hilarious. There are like a couple that are maybe worth taking, but I think mostly the omens are kind of a meme. But then you've got these ones, which a lot of these tattoos are really great, and I've been selling them for a lot. Even though I haven't hit endgame, I've been making a fair bit of currency just from selling tattoos. I really should go ahead and get to endgame, but just having too much fun with this league mechanic. Alrighty, there you have it. There is lore that I missed from talking to the leader, but that's okay. It's outside of the scope of this video. You can explore the lore for yourself. Get ourselves a couple nice tattoos and a bit of chaos orbs. Really enjoying this league mechanic, actually. It's a shame to see people being so frustrated with it, but I understand it because it is really confusing, and honestly it was really frustrating at first too. But now that I'm starting to understand, it's a lot more fun. I hope it is for you too, and I hope this video kind of helps you get there as well. I'm going to be streaming this a lot over the coming days, so if you want to pop by and ask a question or share some strategies, feel free to do so on Twitch, ZiggyD Live. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.